Hello, friends. Thanks for joining me again. I'd like to read you a story called Miracle in the Highlands. It was published in the Chicken Soup for the Soul book in 2010 called A Book of Miracles. And I'm sure you'll agree it was a miracle. There's just no other explanation. When you hear the ending, you'll see what I mean. I hope you enjoy it. All my relatives are from Northern Ireland, but my cousin's husband-to-be was Scottish, so they chose to be married in Braemar, a quaint storybook parish that has been home to kings, noblemen, and luminaries of the art world for centuries. I was happy to attend the wedding and tour the village, surrounded by the legendary and dramatic Scottish Highlands, full of thatch-roofed cottages, emerald green pastures, deep forests, rocky cliffs, and abundant wildlife, and the occasional arched stone bridge over an icy cold babbling brook. I was very eager to explore the Highlands, but the duties of the wedding and family consumed most of my time. The wedding was held in a quaint, ancient stone church, full of warmth and yellow light. I had some time to myself the next day, so I walked to a bicycle shop in the village, rented a mountain bike, and cut out for the Highlands. I called my mother from a phone booth to tell her I'd be gone for the day. She said, "If you see any white heather, pull a few sprigs for me, so I can plant them at home. It's good luck. Purple heather's lucky too, but white heather is very lucky." It took me an hour to get into the hills, but the Scottish Highlands were everything I ever dreamed they'd be. I stopped by a river flowing past a whitewashed cottage and saw fish jumping in and out of the water, rabbits and gray squirrels cavorting on the bank, and a stag resting in the shade on the other bank. The air was also filled with bluebirds, butterflies, and a variety of other insects. It was like I'd stepped into the movie Bambi. Therefore, I named one of the rabbits Thumper. I continued my journey by riding uphill along the riverbank until I reached a bridge. I crossed it and found pastures dappled with sunlight. I strayed into a field and got chased by a herd of cows, which was quite frightening until I realized that they were more afraid of me than I was of them. And they were only following me because they thought I had food. When I stopped, they would all stop and stare at me. And when I stepped toward them, they all stepped back. They could have easily crushed me into a fine powder, but they were afraid of me. It was very surreal for a city boy. Further down the road, I saw a hedgehog, as well as enormous slugs, birds I couldn't identify, a wild goat, and a red fox. The hedgehog rolled itself into a ball when I came near it. I sat down and waited for it to open up and walk again. It finally did, and I got so caught up in watching it, I didn't notice the dense fog rolling in. The day went from clear to stormy within a few minutes, it seemed like, proving a line familiar to anyone from Great Britain. That is, if you don't like the weather, just wait 15 minutes. Without the sun, the temperature dropped about 20 degrees. The clouds were growing darker and threatening. In my hasty departure, I had failed to pack a coat, or long pants, or a blanket, or water. I said goodbye to the hedgehog and began riding in what I thought was the direction home. But all the dirt roads looked the same, and I couldn't simply follow the same path back because I'd come over hill and dale to reach where I was. The terrain was a natural roller coaster. The clouds had obliterated the sun, so I couldn't use that as a guide. I rode for an hour before admitting to myself that I was hopelessly lost. I thought, I know I rode west, then north. If I only had a compass. But I didn't have a compass. I didn't have anything. It was the perfect formula for disaster. No proper clothing, no food or water, no compass, no people anywhere to ask for help. I hadn't seen a living soul for hours, and to top it off, a violent storm was moving in, of course. So I took refuge in an abandoned barn out of desperation because I was getting soaked to the skin. But not wanting to spend the night in icy cold hay, I was forced to press on. The day grew darker, and the initial stages of hypothermia were beginning to set in when I passed a small hill covered with purple heather. At the very top of the hill, I spied a small patch of white heather, the only white heather I'd seen all day. And I thought, well, at least if they find my body up here, I'll be holding in my cold, dead hand the white heather that my beloved mother had asked me to pick for her. So I laid down the bike and climbed to the top of the hill. That was a mud run in itself, an Ironman contest, because every step I took, I slid back 2 or 3 more. But I finally got to the top, and I began to break off a branch of the heather when I saw something shiny underneath it. I pushed the heather aside and saw a compass. Not kidding. I almost jumped out of my shoes. It was exactly what I had asked for. Except for that compass, there was no other sign of the presence of another human being, not even a footprint. It was a cheap plastic compass, kind you'd buy at Big Five or somewhere, and it wasn't fashioned by the gods or anything, but it worked just fine. The direction it pointed me in was the opposite of the way I was planning to go. And when I pedaled into town, I learned that the clouds that had been gathering produced one of the worst storms the area had seen in decades. So it's quite possible I could have frozen to death if I hadn't found the compass. But then I thought, well, why shouldn't a miracle happen here? This is God's country, after all. One of the most spectacular pieces of land he ever slapped together. So soaking wet and freezing, I arrived home and gave my mother the white heather. Later that evening, as I sat with my family by the fireplace, safe and warm from the howling wind and the rain buffeting our small cottage, I recounted my harrowing tale. I thanked my mother for asking me to find the white heather, and God for providing the compass hidden beneath it.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. I hope this story entertained and inspired you. If it did, please consider giving it a like, leaving a comment, subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet, and sharing this story with friends and family who might enjoy it too. Thanks again for joining me on this adventure, and I hope to see you on the next one.